ArtCadets, and welcome to this week's video. Today I've been asked to draw a picture of Ben 10, so I'm going to do a step-by-step tutorial showing how to draw him, and then at the end I'm going to add a splash of colour with my green pastel. So if you're ready, let's go. So to start this drawing of Ben 10, I began by drawing a simple grid with my ruler, and I did a vertical line down the middle of the page, and that was to help make sure that everything's symmetrical and that you can easily follow along and line up other areas that I'm drawing with the centre of the page. For his head, I just did a rectangle to start with and just angled off the sides of his head and his chin to make a little point. And for the top of his head, I just did a semicircle. In the middle of the top section, I did a line to mark where his eyes were going to be, and his eyebrows right on top of those circles are again at quite an angle because he's looking very determined in this picture. His nose is just an upside down V, and his mouth goes off to one side, so again you can use that vertical line to mark out where that would be. His ears are just two semicircles on the side of his face in between his eyes and his mouth. Now above where I did the semicircle for his head, I then extended his hairline by drawing his spiky hairstyle, and the same again for his fringe at the front. And next I drew in the second rectangle down two lines that weren't parallel, but that are going to be his arm. Now he's got one arm in front of his body, so his hand and his arm appear quite big. But I've just done a circle where his hand is going to be, and make sure it's in the right place before I then do the details of his fingers. His second arm that is going backwards would appear a lot smaller, so that gives him the image of being, or the impression of being a bit more 3D. And again, we'll fill in the details of his hand in a minute. On his wrist, he's got his alien gadget, which comes over his wrist, so it's not on the same line as his wrist as his arm. But we'll do the details of that a bit later. And now, just to finish off those details of the hand, he's quite angular, so there's no sort of smooth lines with Ben's hands. And if you're following along, you can just copy the shapes that I've drawn. His hands are fairly simple, they're not too detailed, but it's probably best you try and draw them yourselves from what I've drawn rather than me trying to describe the shapes. After his arms and into the third area of the rectangles that I've drawn on my grid, I'm doing his trousers. And again, one leg is further back than the other, so it will be drawn smaller. And the leg in front that I'm drawing now is again quite angular, so there's no smooth lines. And going down to the bottom circle, because this leg is in front, we're going to have quite a large looking foot, but it will actually create the impression that he's running towards us, so what's in the front of the picture will be bigger than what's in the back. So the only curved lines that are really on this picture are his foot in the front, which I've just done as a curved line, and it almost fills that bottom rectangle. The second foot that's on the back doesn't even go into that bottom rectangle, so So again, all helps to give perspective to the drawing and make him look as if he's running towards you. So just finishing off a few details on his Omnitrix, which is the gadget on his arm, and a few last details. And once I'm happy with the finished drawing, I'm then ready to outline him in my black fine liner. You don't have to do this step, but I do think it gives it quite a nice sharp effect. But just to note, when doing this, if you're going around his eyes, I haven't completely drawn around the whole of his eye, because I've just done round the pupil and the bottom lid and the top where his eyebrows are, because the actual sides of his eyes are just left white in most of the reference drawings I looked at. All will become clear when I do the shading in. And once I'd done the outlining, I was then ready to rub out all the guidelines before doing my shading. So I began by shading in with a 6B mechanical pencil, but you can use any pencil, and just remember that you can vary the darkness of the pencil by the pressure that you apply. So if you want a light colour, then you only press down lightly. If you want to go darker, then you can press down harder, and the softer the pencil, the darker it will be, and the easier it will be to lay the colours down. So remembering that his hair is actually brown, I didn't make this my darkest colour, and that's something to think about when you're doing a picture just in pencil, and maybe your reference picture is in colour. So I made sure that the darkest area, that was his t-shirt in this picture, I did the hardest, darkest pencil colour that was on the page, and everything else was less dark. And you kind of have to remember the range of colours that you can get with a pencil, as I think I talked about in my Don't Be Afraid to Shade video. So the lightest colour obviously is the colour of the paper, and with this being a grey paper, I can actually use that as a colour for my drawing. And the darkest colour obviously will be the blacks or the dark greys, and everything else in between you can change to make your picture more interesting. But have a practice. I think it's really good to do layers of pencil rather than go straight in and press as hard as you can, and don't forget to use circular movements to make sure you don't get streaky lines when you're shading in. And using the pencil stumps that I've got here, or your finger or a tissue or some cotton wool or anything else like that, will help to smooth out your shading. And you'll notice on his trousers I've got a line going vertically down, and there's an area where it's slightly darker, and this carries on down the inside of his leg that's at the front. Now this is to show shadow, so it's, I don't know what else I can say really, it's just to show some shadow on that inside. So just because his trousers are one colour, it doesn't mean that you still can't get the effects of shadows and light and dark within the grey colours that you're using. So what I was saying earlier about his eyes, I'm just using a rubber here to make sure that the eye area around his pupils is a nice clean grey of the paper before I go in with quite a bright pastel pencil. You can use any colour that you've got. It can be felt tip, it can be crayon, chalks, anything. I like the pastels because they come out really bright on this grey paper, and I've chosen just to do one green. I haven't gone in with shades of green just because I want it to look kind of simple, but it gives it a really nice effect when you're only using that one bright green colour. I've also used a white to highlight the whites of his eyes, the areas on his omnitrix, and just a little bit on his shoe and his socks. So almost finished now. I just wanted to say that next week I'm starting a new series of videos called I Wonder, where I'm going to be drawing an eye, and the challenge is to guess who the eye belongs to. So hopefully you can join us for that. The reveal of who the eye will be with next Friday's video. Well, that's all for today, ArtCadets. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have, then don't forget to give it a like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Bye!